Okay, so I'm gonna take a little bit of time here to just go over another example using a while loops and see how we can implement this looping mechanism for our benefit. Now, the first thing I want to do before we get into the actual example is I want to go over how to how to generate a random number. So this is new, and let me show how we do this. The first thing we do when we want to generate a random number is to import the random class like that on line one. So just import random. We call this a class, and it's okay if you just refer to it as a class. We'll talk about classes a little more as we move ahead, but just understand that that's a class. Now, to generate a random number, we use that class random dot, and then we are going to use a function within the class, and so that it's not a mystery, let me show you how that function works. So if you want, you can Google random and then Python, and it gives you quite a few things. But the best option here is to go under this docs python.org. So it is documents within the Python library, literally at python.org. And if I scroll down a little bit, it talks a little bit about this random class, but I want to look at the functions. So there's this seed function. We're not going to use that one. There's a get state. I want to look at this functions for integers, and specifically at this one, rand int. Now the function itself requires two arguments, a and b. That means that we need to give it two values, and the function returns a random number that is a random number n. It is a whole number, a random integer that is going to be between a and b, meaning n, whatever this number is going to be greater than or equal to a, and it's going to at the same time be less than or equal to b. And I guess the biggest takeaway is that we make a random number that is between a and b, or maybe it is a or b. So let's go ahead and test it. So we're going to say rand int, and then in parentheses we need to specify two numbers, two values. So I'll put here 0, 5. I'm going to store this in a variable, and because it is a random number, I will name the variable rand equals whatever this returns. This is going to return again a random number between 0 and 5. And then I want to see that, so I'm going to print it. And if I run this, notice how it prints 2. If I run it again, it still prints 2. Now it's a 4. Now it's a 2. 2 again. 0, 0, 1, 0. You can keep going. 4. And I want us to at least hit a 5. There's a 5, and the only one we have not gotten is the number 3. And I'm about to give up here to get that number 3. There it is, finally. So what happens is that every time you run this code, Python randomly makes a number up that is between 0 and 5. And you just saw that. Every time I ran it, sometimes I got the same number that from the previous run, but not always. And so it is generated randomly. And we print that number on line 7. So let's actually now make an application that models a game that you've played. I'm sure all of you have played this game. It's the name called Guess a Number. So you basically ask a friend of yours, someone who's next to you, say, guess the number I'm thinking of between 1 and 10. So we've all played this game, and then your friend might guess the right number or the wrong number. And we're going to build a Python application that models that game, that asks the user to guess the number that it generated randomly. And so on line 5, this is where the computer generates the random number. So here the application generates the random number. Now we need to ask the user for a guess. And so I'm gonna use, because we are gonna ask the user for for some input, I'm gonna use an input function, and I will ask the user to enter a guess. Now, whatever the user enters, I want to store that in a variable. And so at the very beginning of line 7, I'm going to write num equals whatever is entered by the user through this input function. And because I'm expecting a numeric value, a number, a whole number, I'm going to wrap this around the int function. So this, hopefully you're familiar with line 7. At this point, if you're still having a little bit of a hard time understanding this, make sure that you let me know. I'm going to just run it at this point and see how this is looking. So it is asking me for a guess. I'll put 8, and it prints 0, which happens to be the random number, by the way. Okay, so my guess would have been wrong here. I'll run it one more time. I'll enter 7, and the random number was 4. So again, my guess would have been wrong. By the way, I have a 1 in 10 chance of getting the right number, which means that in 10 guesses, I'll probably get the right number only once. 8. So again, the wrong number, or the wrong guess. Oh, actually, I just realized that my numbers have to be between 0 and 5, and I'm entering numbers here that are bigger than that. So let me do number less than 5 and more than 0. So not quite right. Okay, so we get the idea here. Every time this value can be different, every time you run it. Okay, so now let's actually do the implementation here, where let's ask the user for a random number between 1 and 10. I think is gonna, instead of 0 and 5, I'm gonna do between 1 and 10. So enter a guess. I'm gonna put here between 1 and 10. Means that right here I need to change my bounds, my limits, from 1 all the way to 10. Now the idea here is that if the user enters the right guesses correctly, then we're done. The program stops. But if the user enters a guess that is incorrect, meaning they don't guess the right number, then we want to keep asking. And for that, when we want to keep doing something repeatedly, we can use this while loop. So I'm going to say while. And I know that what I want to do, so notice how I've indented more. I want to keep asking for a guess. So I'm going to copy line 7, and I'm going to paste it there. So while this condition is true, ask again. And the condition that we're going to check for is while num is not equal to guess. Rand, excuse me. Well, let me change this to guess. I think it's a little more appropriate here. Guess and guess. So while guess is not equal to, that's what the exclamation mark means, not equal to the random number, we're gonna go to line 12, which is enter a guess. Actually, let me do a print statement beforehand. Print wrong guess, try again. So I'm gonna print while the guess is not equal to the random number, print wrong guess, try again, and then allow the user to guess again by doing line 13, allowing for user input and storing that in guess. And then we're going to loop back to the top. Now at the end, if I get to line 16, I know that this condition is false. Guess not equal to rand is false, which means that we've guessed the right number. And so on line 16, I will print you guessed correctly. And then I'll put the number is and then I'll terminate this and put rand, whatever rand is. So if I run this, enter a guess between 1 and 10. Okay, let's try 8. Okay, so the random number is not 8, so that's wrong guess. Try again. 7. You guessed correctly, the number is 7, so there we go. I got it in 2 tries. I guess the right number. Let me try one more time here, just so we can, again, feel comfortable with the implementation. 4. So 4 is not the random number. 8. That's not the random number. 2. That's not the random number. You can see how you can keep going until you get it right. So 9. 9 is correct. Now you can see how it works. Let me try to explain how the code is processing these commands, and just get a feel for the flow of the code itself. So rand in the previous example, rand was 9, and then we asked for a guess, an initial guess on line 7. So I put a 4, and while guess, which happens to be 4, is not equal to rand, which is 9. So while that is true, and in this case it is, 4 is not equal to 9, print wrong guess, try again, ask for a number, and store that in guess. And so the second time I store 8. So guess is 8. When we get to the end of the loop, and I know this is the end of the loop because it is indented further, I loop back to line 10 and I check again, is 8, that's what I guessed, right? 8 right here. Is 8 not equal to 9? And the answer again is true. So we print wrong guess, enter another guess, and then I enter the number 2. So guess is 2. I get to the end of the loop. Again, this is the end because it's indented. I loop back to line 10, and is 2 not equal to 9? That's a true statement. So print wrong guess, ask for another guess, and that's when I entered the number 9. So guess is 9, at which point I loop back to line 10. Is 9 not equal to 9? That's a false statement. So we don't execute line 12 anymore. We don't execute line 13. That means we've exited the while loop and we go to line 16, where we say you guessed correctly, the number is 9. And that's the implementation here of this guess the number game using a Python application.